Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Zhang and I am the campus and breaking news reporter for the Daily Texan this fall. And today I am here with the man himself, Mr. Jay Hartzell, who is the president of the University of Texas at Austin. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what his time as president has been like so far. Hopping right into it, my first question is, Mr. Hartzell, what's one goal that you've set for yourself as president that you think you've achieved?
Survival. No, I think it's pretty early in the run. I think as far as the full time gig goes, I'm just done with 2 months. So I haven't really set a short run horizon goals other than just really my head's been down to the large extent since I got the interim job, worrying about COVID, and then the race concerns on campus and at large, and financial pressures. And so we're just starting now to get to where I think our head can come back up and look ahead a little more. But really, it's been trying to tackle problems as they've come. So I honestly haven't had a goal list to worry about as in the very short run.
Mm-hmm. Have you thought of any moving forward?
I think there are things I want to get done. Things. I'll give you one example. I'm excited about the idea of engaging campus and talking about our culture and values. Since I've been a grad student here and then returned as a professor, I don't think I've ever been part of a campus conversation around what's it mean to be a Longhorn, what do we hold special. You've probably seen, Andrew, these kind of Soviet era posters in various rooms that have some one word sort of slogans on them. But I'm excited about the idea that we can take that a little more seriously and spend time talking through as a community what we hold dear. And so that's something that I'm excited about doing in the spring. So that's an example of something I want to get done, but hadn't necessarily thought about it as sort of a, short run, long run goal list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you have just started. So transitioning more onto some current topics, at UT this semester, with regards to the pandemic, we've seen a little over 1,400 cases, and we unfortunately did have one staff member pass away. And the university has invested a lot of time, money, and resources into this reopening project. And overall, would you say that this effort has been a big success, a minor success? How would you characterize it? To what level and why?
Yeah, well, first, and just to be clear, if you go back, including the summer, I think we've had, unfortunately, 2 staff deaths from the disease. And, that it's hard to view anything in light of that as successful. And I also am very aware as a professor who someday will teach again, I think, the idea that you don't want to pass judgment before the final exam. So we probably get an incomplete in the parlance of grading because we're not done yet. But I do think, absent some of the tragic outcomes we talked about aside, I think things have gone better in many ways than I might have expected. So we've had no evidence of transmission of the disease in classrooms, very little evidence of transmission, if any, from our campus community to the rest of Austin. I've looked at numbers for how the student athletes have done. They get tested, up to 3 times a week, and they've done really well. The incidence rates on the testing we've conducted for our students, for example, right now are lower than the overall incidence in Austin. So again, not that any of it's been wonderful, but I think in many ways the students, the faculty and staff have really stepped up, and I think it's gone pretty well. Absent again these some really terrible stories that still break my heart.
Mm-hmm. And you said that in many ways things have gone a little better than you might have expected. What exactly were your expectations there that you're referring to?
Yeah, I never wrote down anything quantitative. I think you look at just to give examples, you look at the disease curve on our COVID dashboard, and when we were planning a lot of the fall semester in July and August, it was a scary time, and nobody knew, was it going to just keep getting worse? Was it going to come back down? Were there going to be different kinds of restrictions on what we could do, either in terms of research or our classes? And so the fact that if you look at the disease curve, it really has come down up until, a few weeks ago, it started to come back up again. But that trajectory, I think, looks really good. The fact that we didn't have to dramatically adjust the way we teach and the way we do research on campus. So that I think is a sense in which I think it's gone pretty well. We haven't had to disrupt our overall teaching or research mission any more than we were at the beginning of the semester.
Mhm. Yeah, so, looking forward to the spring and, while we hope for a vaccine, a lot of epidemiologists and public health experts are predicting that these upcoming months, this winter is going to be very difficult with respect to COVID, So in general, what do you think about these developments in respect to the spring semester? And,
Yeah,
are there any changes that you would like to see?
yeah, you hit on it. I think it's this tale of two cities. It's this the immediacy of how things don't seem to be going. They seem to be going worse in the state and across the country. Austin in general, I think, has done a little better than most of the state, but there's some scary places out there, and that I think gives us pause for concern as we go back into the semester in the spring. On the other hand, the vaccines are good news, and we expect to be able to start to vaccinate our frontline health workers this month now in December. And so that'll be I think a real, I was gonna say shot in the arm, but that's probably too much of a pun. But I do think it's going to be a big boost to morale as that starts to unfold. And I'm hopeful that by the end of, sort of spring break into commencement, that we'll start to see more normalcy. And I don't know exactly what that'll look like yet, because it'll depend on how the disease goes. But, the idea of an in-person commencement of some sort really lifts my spirits and gets me excited about what we might be able to get done.
Hmm. Yeah. So moving on to another topic, last month, the Board of Regents approved a $1.25 million salary for you, which is about $500,000 more than you would have earned as interim president, annualized, and a little over $250,000 than former President Greg Fenves earned before he left. So I wanted to ask you, have you been aware of any public backlash to your salary? And if so, how do you respond to those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I have probably tried to stop looking at my Twitter feed quite as much since it came out, because I know it has been the source of some people commenting on it, and I get it. It is a big sticker number. I do think that it's I've reminded at least a couple of people I've talked to about it that it's set by the board and with the input of the chancellor, and they had I thought some good comments around how they're trying to pay the University of Texas president in a way that is in line with peers. And that's what I thought about as dean when we were trying to set faculty pay. We wanted to pay like peer schools, and it differs by field and by role and by function. And I get that, but I think we should all be trying to pay in line with our peers, whatever that looks like in the fields we're in.
Hmm. Yeah. So with respect to that, before he left, and actually much before he left in 2016, UT President Greg Fenves made, just under $1 million. And he wrote, according to a Statesman, Austin American Statesman information request, that a salary of over $1 million might not play well politically. And, a public university president shouldn't be paid in that region. What do you think about those comments that he wrote?
Well, I know of those comments. I can't get in Greg's head. I
Mhm.
never asked him for his thought process around, what he was thinking when he wrote that. That, and I'm not an expert in all the data, and it wasn't my job to set the pay, but I do know that in the years that have lapsed, I've seen the headlines on the Chronicle of Higher Education, and if you look at where presidential salaries at top research universities have gone, they've risen with a lot of other salaries in the economy. So the fact that there might not have been as many in that level then as there are now is probably right, but I don't know the data enough to tell you how much the broad trend has been.
Mhm. So is there any negotiation, on your side, not necessarily against, but, in conversation with the board about your salary, as it appears that Fenves had when, he was negotiating his salary, I guess, in 2016?
No, I don't know whether this is going to go well or poorly against my negotiation skills, but I took what they offered.
Okay.
So, I thought they made me a fair offer given what I knew about where peer schools were, and I'm really happy to have the job.
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense. Now, moving on to what has been a big topic for students recently, which is the grading policies. So the provost announced last Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, that Students would be given 3 pass-fails to use across the 2 semesters alongside an expanded Q-drop policy. So, the policy was issued last week. We are, only 2 weeks away from the end of semester, basically. What are the reasons why this wasn't considered earlier, from your perspective?
Well, I think it never probably got to my level earlier,
Mm.
and so it wasn't that resolutions didn't make it to my desk that I discarded. It just wasn't earlier. Some of the narrative I heard as part of the faculty conversations coming out of the summer was that the part of the argument for the change in the spring was students didn't really know what was coming, and they signed up for classes under a certain set of expectations, and then a pandemic hits and the world changes. And so being flexible around grades there, where you didn't realize what calculus 2 was going to look like in May when you signed up back in October or January. So that was the idea in the spring. And in the fall, the idea that I heard from faculty was people now were making more informed decisions, that they realized that what classes were going to be in person, what were going to be hybrid, what were going to be online. And so there was more of a known issue coming in. And again, I can't speak to everybody's mindset, but my guess is part of what went through the thought process to decide to make a change late in the semester was an understanding and a realization of how many people had still suffered some really tough circumstances. And they may have known this class was going to be online or hybrid or whatever, but what they probably didn't foresee was how the disease was going to impact their family or their personal circumstances. That's my interpretation of kind of how we got there later in the semester.
Yeah. Do you personally feel like such grading changes were necessary? And, was there any change in your mindset over the course of the semester on this topic?
I see the trade-off, and I think my mindset probably did move more in that same direction that I just talked through, which was the idea that you can't help but be moved and touched by the tough stories that people are going through, and the pandemic hasn't affected everybody the same, and many students have had just really tough circumstances, and all of us want to be helpful there and help students keep making progress, move towards graduation. And so I think as we've all learned the ways in which the pandemic and the current situation can affect students and their families, my guess is almost all of us, including me, have become more sensitive to how do we help students in those tough situations.
Mm-hmm. So, was there any specific moments or stories that you heard that, motivated you or helped drive your mind towards, this sort of different decision?
Not off the top of my mind. I remember, I was at the faculty council meeting when the student government representatives were talking through their resolution and giving some stories, but standing today, it'd be hard for me to recall exactly who said what. But those stories and the quotes and the kinds of things I have heard over the last few weeks have been touching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving on to more of like the technical aspect of the policy. So student governance proposed one policy, faculty council proposed and approved a modified version, kind of, both of which differed from what ended up being implemented. So, why the changes from the faculty council resolution, and who was specifically involved in the decision-making process that modified that resolution to the actual policies, and what did the process look like?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. And so another set of voices that we listened to that were not in the list you went through would be what I would broadly characterize as academic leadership. So we heard from a lot of department chairs, we heard from deans, associate deans, assistant deans, and the like. And so some of that came through the faculty council channel, some of it came other ways. So we listened to those voices as well. We had a sequence of conversations and meetings last week leading up to the decision, including some Zoom call type things with student leaders, faculty council leaders, the provost, and I was there, the dean of students. So we talked through the trade-offs, and I think we came up with something that solves problems for the academic year all at once, rather than doing it piecemeal, which the proposal would have done. I also think it gives students a lot more time to make a better informed decision. So rather than having them try to make some hard decisions within the next several days, it gives time to look back with much better information back upon the entire academic year, which I think is helpful. And it also gives a better role for our advising teams to have conversations with students so that they make good choices when they know more information over more of a relaxed time. So we were very worried about making what could seem like a good local decision, but it might force students into some boxes and making hard calls with poor information now. And it also wouldn't necessarily address the spring.
Hmm. Yeah. So with respect to what you're saying about the deans and the department heads being in the conversation, what exactly would you say is the general sentiment that they brought to the table that ended up showing in the final policies?
Well, I mean, again, look, views differ on this, and even within the faculty council, I didn't listen to student deliberations, and so I don't know that side of the student debates. But if you just go back and look at the faculty council transcripts and deliberations, I mean, there's mixed views, and the deans would be no different. And there are trade-offs, and think about what we do. And imagine hypothetically that we'd adopted something where your fall semester could be pass-fail, and let's say hypothetically that happened again in the spring. Would you want to go out into the workforce with and that under that hypothetical 3/8 of your college career being pass-fail? Or imagine that there's a course you're supposed to take, the fourth finance course, and that builds on 1 through 3, and you took 1 through 3 pass-fail and got Ds in all 3. Then there's an issue there about how much should you think of yourself as a finance major, and how much can the professor rely upon the fact that you really know what was in courses 1 through 3. So those are the trade-offs on the side of what I would think of as a more restrictive policy, where, as I mentioned before, we have heard and we get the idea that there are some really tough circumstances, and we want to find ways for students to make progress and move toward their degrees in light of those tough circumstances. So that, I think, is sort of the trade-off that all groups have raised.
Mm-hmm. And you say, like, overall this sentiment moved the pass-fail number from unlimited, you would say, as many classes you want, down to 3 over the 2 semesters.
Well, I guess, just to be clear, so there's a trade-off in the solution that we ended up approving versus the faculty council version. So there's a cap on the number of courses, but that cap is now across the entire year. And it's with the benefit of looking back in June or July at the entire year's worth of grades, right? So the one that was passed would have required you, I think, to make a decision by December 9th before finals about this semester only. And so there's a trade-off there that we're giving you more information to make a more, I think, ideally rational decision with better information in exchange for a cap on the sheer number of courses that you can decide that for. I also want to be clear, just to make sure that everyone understands, we're also not precluding the idea that students, as they always can do, can opt for some other classes to take them pass-fail from the very beginning. So the sheer number of pass-fails on your transcript might not just be 3 for the year. It just depends on what you elect to take and what you can fit in your schedule and what fits with your degree plan.
Yeah, got that. So moving on to our last big topic, which is the Eyes of Texas. In one of the first messages you wrote on this topic, and the arguments that have arisen from it, you wrote that aspects of its origin, whether previously widely known or unknown, have created a rift in how the song is understood. It is my belief we can effectively reclaim and redefine what this song stands for. So from your perspective as president, and I'm assuming in conversations that you've had, what is your understanding of why students started asking for the song to stop being played?
Well, I mean, the things that I've heard center largely around the things either connected to or related to the origins of the song, having to do with the song being performed at minstrel shows, and those minstrel shows having some components in blackface, the connections to the South, the connections to Robert E. Lee. I've heard concerns over the connections to I've Been Working on the Railroad as a tune. So that it's largely focused on that sort of nexus of things around the early time of the song and its connection to some pretty difficult things going on at our university at that time and in Texas and in the South. But so I think that's the part that I picked up when I went and talked to others.
Mhm. So would you say the song is racist? Yes or no?
As I've said before, I think the song has connections to these difficult things that have racist elements. And I've heard other comments. People say things like it's racially adjacent, or various ways to frame it. And I'm also looking forward to the work of the history committee coming out. And so things that I've heard other people quote things about its history that seem in conflict with each other. And so I don't say that today I've nailed down every fact about the history of the song, and I'm looking forward to having all the facts out on the table in January.
Hmm. But based on what you already know about the song, would you say it's racist?
So as I said, I would tell you that I think it's connected to things that have either are racist or have racist undertones or overtones, if you will. But I'm looking forward to the history coming out and seeing where that takes us.
Yeah. So with regards to the committee, you written that it will chronicle the full history of the eyes and recommend ways we can openly acknowledge, share, and learn from it. So in what ways are you expecting or hoping that the committee will be able to alleviate any harm that has already been perpetrated from the song's history?
So tell me again, what's your question?
Yeah, like what are you hoping to see from the committee that would be able to alleviate or address the harm that might have already been caused from the song?
Yeah, I don't know if it's my place to speak to what could reconcile some harm somebody's felt from the song. But I do think, as I talk to people about the song and its past, I go back to something that somebody told me early on about the quote on the front of our tower that says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Right? I think job number one is to get the truth out, and that's back to what you were asking before. I think it's good for us to get things out in the open and get the history out in the open, so we can think about how we might be able to come together again and look to the future. And the song has, and this is why your previous question about is it racist or not, it's difficult because the song has been so positive and so uniting for so many for many years. And so but there are these connections to things like minstrel shows that obviously none of us feel good about it and are racist. So how do you square all that? And so part of it, I think, is to get us all on the same page in part in terms of what we do and don't know. And I think the history is going to show some things that people didn't realize that I think are difficult for those that love the song. And I also think it'll show some things that are really positive for those that think the song is racist. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see if we can find more of a common ground as the facts get out about not only the origins of the song, but its entire trajectory and path over time.
Hmm. Yeah, and on that common ground note, so the Longhorn Band, the current guideline for them to appear is that internal division over the Eyes of Texas must be resolved. So if those divisions aren't solved in the near future, would you say that the Longhorn Band just won't play? Or are there situations in which the band has division over the song but will be allowed to play?
Yeah, we haven't gotten there, honestly, Andrew. So there's not been a conversation about, as of X date, if Y hasn't happened, what do we do? We just haven't gotten there. We've had a bunch of conversations with the band, either with me or with people from the president's office, having those conversations. And I know that people within the band are struggling with it. And so we've just taken the view, we need time to let those conversations happen, to see what comes out of the process we're all going through. and see where people end up, how they end up feeling about it. And so we haven't had a, if this then that conversation at any point yet.
Yeah, but current state is they won't play, right?
Well, current state is that, as we've mentioned, that the one of the roles of the band is to play the Eyes of Texas, and so if we were going to have the band at an event where the Eyes of Texas was to be played, that would be our expectations that they would play it.
Mhm. Yeah, got it. So I think we're out of time for now. JV tells me you have a hard stop at 3, but thank you so much for talking to me today. Is there anything else you would want to leave me with?
No, I think the last thing I would just say is I would like to say thanks to all the students. I was on a call earlier today where people were asking, how would students who were students at UT during COVID differ from non-COVID UT students in 30 years? And I think it's interesting to think what you all have done and dealt with. Two big buzzwords you probably know from the business school, Andrew, are agility and resiliency. And the student body has shown, I think, tremendous agility and great resiliency. And so I really am grateful for the way that people have, in general, behaved well, thought of each other, cared for each other, worried about the community, and found ways to continue to learn and enjoy UT. And the fun times that many of us appreciate about being together in person, whether that's being at a football game or being at a meeting of a club or a party, those are going to come back. And so the fun parts will return more in earnest, and we'll get back to being the special place that we know we are. In the meantime, I'm really pleased that so many faculty, staff, and students have found ways to make UT stay special even in the age of COVID. So thank you.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for that. And thank you so much for talking to me today. I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Great. You too. Take care.